Now, Steve Turner is our next guest. He's the Assistant General Secretary of the Unite Union. I've known him for many years. He is a courageous, fighting trade unionist. He's standing to be the next General Secretary of the Unite Union, which I'm a member of, and to be the successor of Len McCluskey, who's led the union now for around a decade or so during a period of tumult and crisis. Steve's been very involved, for example, in a leading force in the anti-austerity movement through the People's Assembly, which he chairs, and is involved in multiple struggles and is one of the leading trade unionists in the country. So, Steve, let's welcome Steve in. Hello, Steve. How you doing?
Hi, Owen. Hi, Owen. Thanks for that. I hope I can live up to that introduction.
Yeah, I know. Don't disappoint people. I have raised their expectations. So do not disappoint. I'm just saying it's a warning. Before we're going to come on to Labour and Keir Starmer. Oh yes, we are. But first, we're going to start. Let's talk first in terms of let's talk about Liberty Steel, and this is something which has been, of course, in the news over the last few days. To be fair, interestingly, given some of the questions I'm going to ask about Labour, Ed Miliband did come out and talk about the possibility of nationalisation. Just tell us about what's going on with Liberty Steel and the role of Unite.
Well, Liberty Steel is a part of a foundation industry for the steel industry here in the UK, along with British Steel and Tata. Liberty produces speciality steel products, mainly for the automotive and the aerospace sectors, offshore oil and gas drilling. Liberty Steel is indebted. It's not transparent in terms of its financial operations. It raises money from various sources around the world. One of its major sources of funding, billions of pounds, is Greenshill Finance. Greenshill's in real trouble at the moment, and therefore the owner, an individual, Gupta, is seeking to refinance the company. I've grave doubts about the success of that initiative, and therefore I met with Kwasi Kwarteng, along with the other steel unions, as Secretary of State for Business, to make a call for the state over the course of the coming period, the immediate coming period, to step in, to intervene, and to put the finances in place to save Liberty Steel, not just for the 5,000 jobs directly, and indeed the many thousands in the supply chain, but to save a foundation industry that's in real threat right now. Not for the fault of the communities that have supported this business for years or the workers that have worked within it. This is a finance capital issue and a failure of finance capitalism. And the state needs to step in because it is such an important industry for our economy.
Now, I'll ask you about the pandemic and so on, but just linking onto that, in terms of the green industrial revolution, which is long overdue, the climate emergency is an existential threat facing humanity, so it'd be kind of cool if we sorted that one out. But I suppose it's also an opportunity in terms of skilled jobs, manufacturing, of course. So much manufacturing in this country has been gutted over successive governments over a very long period of time with terrible consequences in many communities. So what's your thoughts in terms of, your own view and what Unite's position is on what a green industrial revolution would look like, and what kind of jobs could it create, and the impact on communities?
Oh, I think there's a real opportunity here. This is a time right now, not just because of COVID, but with the climate emergency, post-Brexit trading relationships with the rest of the world, to reset the clock, actually, and to put manufacturing back centre stage in a new economy, a greener economy, but also a fairer economy, and an economy that for the first time in a long time talks about full employment, but in decent jobs, and supporting coming generations with apprenticeships and skills to enable us to build back better, and not from a soundbite or rhetorical point of view that the Tories use, of course, but we have to recover and rebuild from COVID, from Brexit. And in doing that, we have to put a green economy centre stage. So how do we do that? I mean, we've been at the forefront of developing our own industrial strategy in the absence of a government industrial strategy. I mean, ironically, we've got a Secretary of State right now that's just abolished the Industrial Strategy Council and wants to rename his department from Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy to God knows what. But they have a distinct lack of any strategy, of course, and more worryingly, a lack of any plan to recover our economy and put a green industrial revolution at the forefront of it. So we've developed our own strategy, and just a couple of weeks ago, I launched our Magnificent 7 projects to create over 1 million new green jobs. This is about transitioning our existing main core industries, of course, our auto industry, to transition from combustion engines to green technology, whether that's batteries or fuel cell hydrogen, our steel manufacturing industry to arc furnaces and hydrogen again, to manufacturing that hydrogen, to generating green electricity, to getting natural gas out of our economy, out of our homes, of course, and replacing that with hydrogen and more electricity generated projects, making sure that we manufacture here in the UK the goods that we're going to need to transition our economy. So if we're going to build the 1 million new homes that we need, council houses, to address the housing crisis and homelessness, and we can do that, and we should never fall into the trap of believing that the 5th richest nation on our planet, we can't afford to invest in our people, because absolutely we can. These are political choices to leave people homeless on our streets or in bed and breakfast accommodation or in precarious rented deals with private landlords. We can build the council houses that we need, and in doing that, create the direct, good, skilled, secure jobs that we need with the apprenticeships for our kids, unionised jobs, well-paid jobs in our economy to do that. We can also retrofit our homes. One of the biggest challenges that we've got is decarboning our domestic housing and our commercial property portfolios. And retrofitting that is really important. Again, getting natural gas out, but also making sure that we're installing products to green our homes here in the UK, like the heat pumps, like the battery storage, energy storage capabilities, even our double glazing and our solar panels, making sure that we're doing that here in the UK. On energy generation, for instance, Owen, you may or may not know, we've got the largest offshore wind farms in Europe, in the North Sea and indeed in the Irish Sea and all around the coast of Scotland. And yet not a single wind turbine is manufactured here in the UK. It's quite disgraceful that we've allowed that situation to emerge. And what could and should have been a real success story in the generation of non-fossil fuel electricity power has become, a real obstacle to the creation of legacy good jobs. In our aerospace sector, we've got the technology now to fly long-haul flights using biofuels and not fossil fuels. We can do that. We can do that right now. But of course, we don't invest in the technology to manufacture those biofuels. We want to put broadband. How useful would that have been over the course of the last 10 months? We want to put broadband into everybody's homes. That will create thousands of jobs, installing that and maintaining that program. But let's make sure that we manufacture the high-speed fibre optic cable that we need to do that here in the UK. When I met with the CEO of Openreach just about a year ago before lockdown, he was planning to fly to North Carolina in the United States to buy hundreds of thousands of miles of cable from the US rather than manufacturing it here. So let's make sure that we're manufacturing those products here, and let's invest in our local services, our public sector. Let's invest in care for the elderly. If COVID's identified anything, it's identified those gross inequalities in society. And of course, dealing with that with decent public sector jobs, reducing the size of our classrooms, so employing more teachers and teachers' assistants and expanding our education programme, investing in care and health, of course, really, really important areas of work. Local services, many of our councils are at the point of filing for bankruptcy right now and can't provide statutory services, let alone the essential services that we need. These are all green jobs. And there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of green jobs that could be created there, but we have to pay for them. And if we're going to pay for them, that's where high value exports from our manufacturing sector take precedence. So, we've got a plan. We've launched our plan. I talk to government about it on a daily basis, to be honest with you. And we have some success in moving forward, but they have no real vision or ambition to put manufacturing centre stage, or indeed to use the power of the state and procurement from the state, the ability to borrow money at 0% interest rates now for the next 70 years or so, to use that money as a positive investment to pump prime a changed economy and create that full employment environment that's so important to us and indeed for coming generations. But not any old job, not precarious jobs, not 0 hours jobs or minimum wage jobs. Let's get decent jobs. Let's get pride back into work and give people the respect that they deserve.
Amen. And as well as all that, the broadband point, very important. I've been kicked off my own show twice in the last few months live because of broadband, so that would be good to sort out. Before I ask you about Labour, just the pandemic. Now, I know you played a big role in securing the furlough scheme, so tell us about that. But also about how bosses are using or taking advantage, basically, of the pandemic to attack wages, terms and conditions of workers. And what's the strategy to fight back?
Yeah, look, I mean, don't let anybody tell you that the Tories just woke up one morning and thought furlough was going to be a good idea. This was a long discussion with the Treasury team and with Rishi Sunak as the Chancellor personally. And I was very proud to be part of that very small team in the TUC. I worked there for Unite, went for Unite, to be leading those discussions about the necessity to protect pay as we went into this pandemic, because we could see millions of workers being laid off as the economy started to lock down. And of course, we already have some of the highest levels of personal and household debt in any developed nation. We've already got people in an incredibly precarious position. Poverty levels are extremely high. The UN already speaks about 14 million people in the UK being in poverty. We've got 10 million using food banks. I mean, just this morning we saw the article on 9 out of 10 local authorities have seen an increased use of food banks during the course of the pandemic. So we were entering this pandemic in a very dangerous place. And that's not just to do with COVID, to be honest with you. I mean, this is decades and decades of neglect in supporting people in our communities and our wider society. So we went into those discussions and we ended up convincing the Chancellor of the Exchequer to introduce what eventually became furlough. And lots of people fell through the cracks, and we've tried to plug those holes on a consistent basis all the way through. And we've had some successes in there. We're opening up an opportunity for shared work on furlough, and indeed for the self-employed to be protected as well during this pandemic. And still hundreds of thousands of people have fallen through the cracks. But while we're trying to continue to close them, and we still have discussions with the Treasury about that, let's not take our eyes off what is a fantastic victory for our union movement and for working people through this pandemic. And that was the introduction of furlough. And that genie is not going to be put back in the box very easily by this government or any successive government. This is about the state playing its role in supporting its people during very difficult periods in time. And it was really based on a discussion we were having about the German model for short-time working, where when they go into a cyclical decline in their industrial heartlands, they lay people off on short-time working. They halve their working week. The companies pay for the 50% that they work, and the state picks up the remainder of the wage bill. And industry pays for that through like an insurance policy payment all the way through. So, you know, the state picks it up, but industry plays its part as well. And that's about a progressive taxation system. So we can do that. We should do that. And we'll never lose sight of that. In terms of the wider attacks we've seen, well, you know, Section 118 notices, this fire and rehire that you're starting to see now is not new, but of course it's taken a real prevalence, and some real high profile attacks on working people have come during the course of the last year. We've seen British Gas do it. We've seen British Airways do it. We've got disputes at Heathrow Airport right now across our bus sector, whether that's in London or indeed in Manchester, go northwest, where workers are being expected to take huge hits to their wages in order to pay for a crisis which is not of their making, and permanent attacks on terms and conditions and rates of pay as well, not temporary ones to deal with a crisis. And we'd all sit down and negotiate deals with businesses that are in trouble. That's what we do day in, day out. 99% of my work is dealing with good companies, actually, good employers that want to treat people properly, that we have good relationships with, who are in really, really difficult situations. So we reach temporary accommodations with them, but don't make permanent cuts. This is just an opportunistic attack. And we'll fight that with every ounce of strength in our body. We've now got a £40 million strike fund in our union. That's growing month on month on month. And we'll deploy that to ensure that workers that are fighting back against these attacks are not starved back into work. And that's incredibly important for us. So we'll use the industrial muscle and strength that we have to make sure that employers can't get away with it. But we'll also use, and this is probably a lead into a more general political question, use our political influence as well to change the law. The government could end fire and rehire overnight with a swish of a pen. It chooses not to do that. That's a political choice. We can make different political choices to make a real difference for ordinary working people who want to get up in the morning and go to work and come home as safe as they entered that workplace. And they want to feel secure in work on a long-term basis, not just on a day-to-day basis, in a well-paid environment, a safe environment. And that's what the union movement provides for millions of workers, actually, whether in the union or not, for millions of workers across the UK and the wider world.
Dalian Haynes has commented, Steve Turner smashing it out right now. #ST for PM. There you go. Before your rise to the Premiership. There's another guy at the moment who's with those aspirations. How's Keir Starmer doing then, Steve?
Well, Keir, I can't hide my disappointment, and I'm not going to from you either, to be honest with you. I mean, look, Keir was elected, and I'm a Democrat. I'm a socialist, but I'm a Democrat. And Keir was elected just about a year ago now, but he was elected on a number of promises, a number of pledges that he'd made, and he seems to be disappointing on a daily basis in terms of fulfilling those promises, to be fair. I mean, I don't think anybody in the nation wanted to see, a political game of ping pong being played during the course of the pandemic. This was an opportunity for the nation to come together and for politicians to come together in the defence of our national interests. And, medicine should be nationalised just as water and rail and public transport more generally should be. But it's not. It's in the hands of the private sector, of course. And Keir, I think it was an interesting point that David made in your earlier conversation. Keir made that choice, really, to allow government to disengage from Westminster. And therefore, Labour's become more and more irrelevant as the debate has become more and more limited inside the House. But Keir's made deliberate choices, not just internally, and that's quite obscene. The level of attacks that we're seeing on ordinary Labour Party members across our country right now in CLPs trying to raise, discussions on sensitive issues, absolutely, but issues that should be at the heart of a democratic party to be able to have a debate about. Suspending whole CLPs and members for doing that, or even raising the spectre of a debate, is just wrong. It's just wrong. It's got to stop. What Keir did with Jeremy, of course, has got to be put right. Jeremy's got to be installed back into the parliamentary Labour Party. The NEC made a decision to end that suspension, and it was quite disgraceful that the agreement that was actually reached behind the scenes to allow that to happen was then disregarded by Keir personally, who then suspended him from the PLP. So all of these internal issues need to be resolved, because what people don't want to see is internal navel gazing. They want to see a clear vision for a future, and a future that gives them the security that they need for not just themselves, but their kids and their parents and coming generations as well. And that kicks back into what we're trying to do with the Green New Deal, about our public services, the outrageous 1% offer, which is effectively a pay cut to our nursing staff, our NHS heroes. But of course, more importantly, millions of other key workers are getting nothing from the government. It's all just completely ignored. So, I think Keir needs to step up to the plate. We need to generate a very clear, distinctive vision for our party moving forward. And we need to get out in our communities. He's closed down the community organising project, which is a big mistake, in my view, to be honest with you, because we need to take our ideas. We've got a fantastic manifesto in 2017 built on in 2019. That didn't lose us the 2019 election. That really was more of a Brexit election than anything else. The ideas in there were incredibly popular with the electorate. We just didn't get the time to have that discussion on the doorstep with them about them or in our workplaces. So we need to stop talking to ourselves. We need to stop the infight. People don't like that. They won't vote for a party that's infighting. We need to get out in our communities and build that movement, actually, that was spoken about earlier as well. That broad movement, and inspire and motivate people to come home to Labour. We're a distinctive party. We've got a clear vision for a future that's based on the needs of people as well as, society more generally. But people are the centre of our economy. They're the centre of our nation. They're the only body really that's important in terms of creating an environment that works for all. And if we're going to do that, Labour's the only party for that. So I've been here before. I was here with Neil Kinnock. I was here with Tony Blair. I didn't walk away from that fight. I've never walked away from a fight in my life. Now's the time to put on your gloves and get in the ring. But you do that, and you do that not by ranting and shouting or throwing things in from outside. You do that in a positive way, in my view, sitting at the table, having those discussions and winning the argument for it, winning the argument inside the party, but also winning the argument in every workplace that we organise in, back in our communities, down the pub, on the bus, in our homes. This is a debate about what sort of society do we want to be. COVID, Brexit, climate, all of these challenges give us the opportunity to do that. And we're missing that opportunity right now. Our silence is deafening. Our inability to step up to government failure is deafening. And it's sad. It's sad. This is my party. And I'm saddened by the fact that we're not kicking back on the obscenity of billions of pounds of taxpayers' money being handed over to the private sector And now we've got a Tory party riding the waves on the polls on the back, ironically, of our wonderful NHS. Our NHS delivering a vaccine programme, the public sector, public funded, public body that they so desperately have tried to, privatise over generations now as best as they can. It's the single biggest victory that Labour has ever achieved, our National Health Service. And the Tories are riding high on that. And all these other things are just, fading away without a challenge from Labour. And that's incredibly bad from a policy point of view from Labour, but it's an awful position to be in my view, and we need to put that right.
Amen, Steve. I heartily agree with that analysis, and I hope that the 10 pledges which Keir Starmer did stand on domestic policies, including common ownership, higher taxes on the rich, investment, scrapping the trade union laws, common ownership, all of those things, those were promises. They're red lines that can't be crossed, and he has to be held to account, as well as, of course, the reinstatement of Jeremy Corbyn as the NEC ruled. And perhaps not stitching up selections by imposing one-man shortlist, including a guy who I covered in The Guardian 2.5 years ago, following a all-expenses paid trip he took to Saudi Arabia, hosted by the Saudi dictatorship, whilst they are carpet bombing Yemeni children, beheading dissidents and gay people, and brutalizing women. These are definitely conversations that need to be had, but we really appreciate your time. That was huge amounts of comments, very, very supportive, people very, very impressed by your lucid analysis. And for those who are members of Unite, Steve, of course, is standing to be the General Secretary, and a brilliant General Secretary he would be as well. But Steve, really appreciate your time, and look forward to having a pint with you on the other side of this.
So back at you.
Cheers.
Thanks, Owen. Cheers. Thanks.
Take care, buddy. Take care. See you.